Welcome to the Pencil Bob channel. I hope you enjoy my stories. Please like and subscribe, and hit that notification icon so you never miss out. Now on with the stories.
When I first laid eyes on the condo, it felt like a hidden gem in the middle of a town that most people wouldn't give a second glance. It wasn't the Ritz, sure, but it had been updated, and for $50,000? It felt like the kind of deal that only came around once in a lifetime. The location wasn't bad, either, nestled in a quiet part of southern Oregon, away from the hustle and bustle of the city. It wasn't exactly paradise, but it had its charm. The streets were lined with tall pines, the air always carrying the crisp scent of the woods, and the sunsets over the nearby hills painted the sky with shades of pink and gold that made you stop and take notice. The complex had 6 condos in total, 2 of which were owned by folks like me who had probably seen the same opportunity I had. The other 4 were vacant and bank-owned, their windows dark and lifeless, like the eyes of a ghost town. There was something a little eerie about those empty units, but I shrugged it off. After all, a condo for $50,000 in this market was unheard of, and the fact that the HOA had been defunct for over a decade was just the cherry on top. Who needs an HOA anyway? No one breathing down your neck about the color of your curtains or how long you could leave your trash cans out on the curb. It seemed like a perfect setup. The first few years were smooth sailing. The neighbors kept to themselves, which suited me just fine. The empty units stayed empty, gathering dust and cobwebs, but they weren't my concern. I focused on making my condo a cozy little retreat. I put up new curtains, repainted the walls a soft blue, and even planted a small garden out back. Life was simple and peaceful, just the way I liked it. But, of course, nothing good lasts forever. It started with whispers in the wind, rumors that someone was interested in buying the vacant units. At first, I brushed it off. Who in their right mind would want to invest in a nearly abandoned complex in a town that had more deer than people? But the rumors persisted, and then they became reality. Some guy from LA swooped in out of nowhere and scooped up all 4 of the vacant condos. He had money to burn and didn't waste any time. I heard he charmed the pants off the bank manager, probably with promises of revitalizing the area or some nonsense like that. I tried to stay optimistic. Maybe he'd fix up the place, sell the units to some decent folks, and we could form a small, quiet community. But then, he went after my neighbor. The guy who lived next door had been there for years, a retired teacher who spent his days tending to his bonsai trees and feeding the birds. I didn't think he'd sell. He had roots here, or so I thought. But money talks, and the guy from LA must have made one hell of an offer because before I knew it, the moving trucks showed up, and my neighbor was gone. Now, it was just me and this guy from LA, who suddenly owned every unit in the complex except mine. That's when the nightmare started. He knocked on my door one afternoon, all smiles and handshakes. He introduced himself as if we hadn't already crossed paths a few times in the parking lot. I could tell right away he was trouble, the kind of guy who oozed confidence and charm. But underneath it all was something cold, calculating. He tried to make small talk, asking how I liked living here, how long I'd been in town. But I wasn't in the mood for pleasantries. I wanted to know what his plans were, and I wasn't about to play nice to find out. He didn't beat around the bush for long. He got to the point quickly, telling me about his grand vision for the complex. He wanted to revitalize the place, make it appealing to new buyers, and, of course, reinstate the HOA. My heart sank when he said it. I knew what that meant. He was going to bring back all those rules and fees, and with him owning almost everything, he'd have complete control. I tried to reason with him, told him I bought the place because there was no HOA. I liked my freedom, my peace and quiet. He just smiled and nodded, as if he understood, but there was something in his eyes that told me he didn't give a damn about what I wanted. And then he started with the threats. Oh, he didn't say it outright at first. No, he was too slick for that. But he made it clear that if I didn't play ball, things could get very uncomfortable for me. He talked about how easy it would be to push through new rules, levy steep fees, and make life a living hell. The way he said it, so calm and collected, sent a shiver down my spine. I knew he wasn't bluffing. I wasn't going to roll over for this guy. I'd been through too much in life to let some LA hotshot push me around. So, I did what any sane person would do. I lawyered up. I found a local attorney who specialized in real estate and prepaid for his services. Together, we fired off a letter to this guy, laying out the facts. We pointed out that an HOA couldn't just be resurrected out of nowhere, not after being defunct for over a decade. There were laws, procedures, things he couldn't just bulldoze through with his money and charm. But then, the attorney came back with some news that hit me like a ton of bricks. In Oregon, there's this weird law that says an HOA can be reinstated if it hasn't been officially disbanded for over 20 years. We were in a gray area, and this guy knew it. He could do it, and with him owning nearly everything, he could set up a board, vote himself in as president, and there'd be nothing I could do about it. He'd control everything, including me. I tried to keep a poker face when I next saw him, but inside, I was pissed. He had all the power, and he knew it. He made me a cash offer for my place, a lowball figure that made my blood boil. He acted like he was doing me a favor, like I should be grateful he was even offering to buy me out. I told him where he could shove his offer, and that's when the threats got worse. He wasn't even subtle anymore. He told me he was going to set up the HOA, and once he did, he'd slap me with so many fees I wouldn't know which way was up. He said he'd make it impossible for me to stay, that I'd either sell to him or get kicked out. The way he said it, so casual, like he was discussing the weather, sent a chill down my spine. This guy wasn't playing around. I knew I was in a tight spot. If he followed through with his plan, I'd be buried under fees, probably end up losing the place, and be out on the street with nothing to show for it. So, I had to think fast. I came up with a story, something that would buy me time. I told him my late mother had helped me with the down payment, that I still owed the bank a lot of money, and I'd need more than what he was offering to even think about selling. I threw out a number, something outrageous that I figured he'd never agree to, and then I waited. To my surprise, he didn't balk. He didn't laugh in my face or tell me to take a hike. He actually seemed to consider it. Maybe he thought I was bluffing, that I'd cave and take whatever he offered in the end. But I stood my ground, kept up the act, and eventually he came back with a new offer. It wasn't what I'd hoped for, but it was enough to get me out of there, and that's what mattered most. I took the money and ran, bought a new place far away from that nightmare of a complex. This time, I made sure there was no HOA. No chance of someone like him coming in and pulling the rug out from under me. But as I settled into my new home, a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been played. Sure, I got out with some cash in my pocket, but at what cost? The guy never even set up the HOA, never followed through on his threats. Maybe he was just bluffing the whole time, or maybe he'd gotten what he wanted by scaring me off. I'll never know for sure. What I do know is this: when it comes to buying property, especially in a place with a history like that, you've got to do your homework. You can't just assume that because something's been dormant for years, it's dead and gone. The past has a funny way of creeping up on you when you least expect it, and in this case, it almost cost me everything. So, if you're ever thinking about buying into a complex, especially one with an HOA, be careful. Don't just take things at face value. Dig deep, ask questions, and make sure you know exactly what you're getting into. Otherwise, you might find yourself in a situation like mine, staring down the barrel of a loaded HOA and wondering how the hell you got there. As for me, I'm just glad to be out of that mess. I've got a new place, a fresh start, and no HOA to worry about. But every now and then, when I'm sitting on my porch, enjoying the peace and quiet, I think about that guy from LA, wonder what he's up to, and thank my lucky stars I never have to deal with him again. I think you dodged a bullet getting out of there. The nature of a condo is that all the owners are equal owners of the shared spaces, property, and structures, like the roof. There is no HOA or it's bankrupt. Who is paying the taxes on the shared property? What about insurance? What money is gradually being set aside for a roof replacement and other capital expense stuff like that? You should be happy you got out without getting slapped with a massive assessment. In fact, since this LA guy bought your place and obviously knew the situation, he can't even make a claim that you didn't disclose prior to the sale. This is the best possible scenario for you. Seriously, HOAs are the worst invention ever. This guy's story just proves how messed up the whole system is. Like, how is it even legal for some random dude to buy up a bunch of units and suddenly have the power to resurrect a dead HOA? That's straight up bullying if you ask me. And the fact that Oregon law allows this crap to happen after 15 years of inactivity? Give me a break. It's clear these laws are designed to screw over regular folks and give all the power to rich jerks who can afford to buy multiple properties. The whole thing is rigged against normal homeowners who just want to live their lives without some power-tripping board telling them what color their mailbox can be. This story makes my blood boil. I bet that guy is sitting pretty now, probably jacking up fees and making stupid rules just because he can. HOAs need to be abolished, period. They're nothing but a way for nosy neighbors and greedy developers to control people's lives and squeeze every last penny out of them. Count me out. I'll never buy in an HOA community, no matter how nice it looks. Oh my God, this is insane. I can't believe that guy from LA could just come in and take over everything like that. It's so unfair. The person who wrote this story should have fought harder, in my humble opinion. Like, why didn't they try to get the other neighbors together to fight back? Seems like they just gave up too easy. And that thing about the HOA coming back after being gone for so long is crazy. How come nobody knows about this stuff? They should teach this in school or something. It's scary to think you could buy a place thinking you're free from all that HOA garbage and then boom, surprise, you're stuck with it again. Makes me never want to buy a condo or anything. Too risky. Grandpa's South Florida HOA. Worse than the scammers stealing from the elderly. So as the title suggests, my dad and I have been dealing with my grandfather's South Florida, West Palm Beach, 6th Borough of Hell, HOA. For context, my step-grandmother passed away at the start of COVID from heart surgery complications, 6 months after the surgery. So it was very shocking for all of us. Now he has been stuck in a depressive rut for the last 3 to 4 years. He used to play tennis every day now. He goes from his bed to the couch, then to the kitchen, then back to bed. However, he was still taking care of the big-ticket stuff, like the HOA dues and the car lease. So my dad and I went down to visit in March. He told us he paid the annual HOA dues with a cashier's check and decided to keep the car he had, so he bought it with a loan because the car payment would only be $20 more a month. That said, rates were 9% in fall, 23 when he bought it out. But then we started looking through his mail because Lazy Bones wasn't. And we noticed all of these past due letters, one from the HOA threatening a lien and the other saying my grandfather's car would be repossessed in a month or two if he didn't respond. WT, if we have the bank receipt of the cashier's check and Grandpa has enough money in his account for the auto pay on the car loan, what gives? The bank was refusing to send the $20 more because my grandpa hadn't authorized it. So for 6 or 7 months, my grandpa was $20 delinquent on his car loan, so it bottomed out his near-perfect credit score. At the start of the year, he sent a cashier's check for the annual HOA dues, but the HOA's lawyers sent back letters demanding payment. My grandfather, thinking all was okay enough in the world, didn't really bother to check his mail. Going outside for anything other than liquor is hard. So when we get there, we see the letters reach out to the lawyer via email saying, "Hey, we have the receipt for the cashier's check. Did you never get it?" He emails back saying the bank said, "The cashier's check funds are insufficient." We replied with, "We aren't aware how it's possible JP Morgan Chase with its $4 trillion in assets is insufficient on funds. Cashier's checks are written by the banks for other banks to cash. They can only be insufficient if the bank is bankrupt." Lawyer, feeling embarrassed, forwards us the email from the bank saying, "Will, that's what the bank said." It was declined because part of my grandpa's signature was outside of the designated box. Now we are arguing about the late fees. We are willing to pay the late fees for January to March out of goodwill since the signature was my grandpa's screw-up. But they want late fees from March to the present. Even though it was their fault, it took so long to figure out what was wrong with the check, and they weren't telling us how much we owed them once we started contacting them. We are pretty confident the lawyer intentionally delayed his responses to drag this out so he collects more on his commission because he was expecting commission on a house. Effing scumbag. We know this because the HOA ran a credit check. In the emails, the lawyer was under the impression my grandpa was broke because he referenced his car delinquency and low credit as reasons why they were going to pursue a lien back in March. Of course, once we stepped in, that stopped immediately. I can only imagine how many elderly people are getting taken advantage of. So many elderly people don't have kids and aren't fortunate enough to have trustworthy people managing their estate. Meanwhile, Florida keeps passing laws strengthening HOAs at the detriment to its citizens. Screw the HOA. Edit. Yes, we have a lawyer. 100,000% this. 100,000%. I can tell you stories both personal and professional. Next time you check on them, their bank account could be overdrafted after they gave their money to someone saying they won the lotto, they never bought a ticket for, and need to pay taxes to claim it. Or they gave thousands to someone over the phone for credit monitoring or software virus cleaning service or ransomware removal. Or they canceled their Medicare because someone called them to unlock all of their medical benefits they're entitled to and enrolled in some chicken shit insurance you've never heard of. I can't begin to tell you how many phone calls, letters, emails, or straight-up door-to-door salesmen are ready to take their money, and they aren't going to get better at stopping it regardless of how much education you try to give them. If you can't get them assisted living, you need to secure power of attorney on their finances to protect them from themselves if they choose to live independently. I recently purchased a house, getting out of my own HOA mess. When I went to the title company to finalize everything, they asked me if the check was going to bounce. I laughed and said I really hope not, because it was a cashier's check. Now I am a little worried. Anyways, the HOA is stupid. They should have known immediately if there was a problem with the check and got it resolved right then. It also sounds like you need a new bank. Yes. What's more frightening is that unit owners were permitted to vote down contributing to their reserve accounts for so long that their dues are now skyrocketing. That building collapsed because the board had no money for repairs. They had no money because year after year unit owners would vote not to increase their dues so as to contribute more to their reserve account. 96 people died as a result. Now the law says your reserve account must be fully funded, meaning you must have enough money in your account to make any needed repairs by the time you need to make them, and you are no longer allowed to vote against contributing. The structural integrity reviews, which are also required, is evidencing that many buildings require repairs right now. And huge repairs, like balconies or streets, etc. Only way to come up with that money is special assessments or raised dues. I've seen some HOAs go from $400.00 per month to $1,200 per month. Or have special assessments in the thousands. That's why so many condos are for sale right now in Florida. NJ just adopted a similar, and at least 7 other states have bills waiting to be approved.
I would like to thank you for watching the video to the end. To encourage us to make more videos, please like, subscribe, comment, as well as share. Check out this other video if you haven't already.